Welcome to App Stories, a weekly exploration of the world of apps. Today's show is brought to you by Luna Display and Clean My Mac X. I'm John Voorhees, and with me is my co-host, Federico Viticci. Hi, Federico.
Hey, John. How are you?
I'm doing all right. I've been diving into shortcuts a lot more the last week because we're going to talk about shortcuts today.
Interesting. So I can imagine that there's going to be a lot of details and examples to share. I think before we jump into that, there's going to be some follow-up that we need to share with our listeners. What do we have?
We do. We have a little bit of follow-up. And, one of the things that I mentioned on the last show when we were talking about the Apple Watch and complications and faces on all of that was that I was using the large heart rate complication and wasn't really satisfied with it. Felt like it was taking up too much space for what it does. And Tim Nahumik, who wrote our excellent drafts review for Drafts 5 on MacStories, he reminded me of HeartWatch, which is a very good app, which I know both of us have used in the past. And it has complications for the new watch faces and has a nice little small round complication that looks a lot like one of the weather complications where it'll show you, an outline of a circle, and on one end will be your low heart rate, on the other end will be the high, and in the middle is, I think, the average or current heart rate. So that's a nice complication if you're looking for something that takes up a little less space, but also tracks your heart rate. The other thing is a couple of listeners got in touch with me about the Netatmo weather station, because remember, I was trying to sell you on this, and now I'm going to tell you not to get it because it doesn't support Weather Underground anymore. It can't be a Weather Underground base station anymore. They abandoned that. Now, one listener did tell me that Carrot Weather might be picking up the ball on this, but I don't know. I haven't talked to Brian Mueller about that. I don't know if that's the case or not. But
this is listener rumor
about a third-party weather app. Yes, but we'll see. I mean, I think that'd be kind of cool if Carrot Weather did that. But we'll see. I haven't seen it in any of the betas myself yet.
All right.
So today we're going to talk about shortcuts, and I'm sure that we will talk about shortcuts more than once. And we thought we would at least gather up a handful of ones that we use regularly in kind of our day-to-day work and life and whatever, and talk about them. And what we're going to do is we're going to gather these up after we're done talking about them, and you're going to include them on MacStories in a directory that you've been working on of shortcuts that you've been updating. I guess they're workflows that are being converted to shortcuts, and they're being categorized, and there'll be a special page on MacStories. We're gonna come out, but by the time this show is published, there will be a very initial soft launch of this page, I guess is what you would call it, because it's going to have some of them, but not all of them. But there's a lot more to come in the future, right?
Yeah. So the idea is, I'm in the process of converting 4 years of workflows that I created for the workflow app to shortcuts. So I'm going through the whole archive of the workflows on MacStories, downloading each one, updating it for shortcuts, because whether it's old actions or old techniques that I can now streamline, I'm adding descriptions to each of them and I'm categorizing them. And I want to share them on this archive page where we can have all of these little widgets that allow you to download each shortcut. So by the time this episode comes out, there will be an initial, not even beta, alpha version of this page where you will be able to download the shortcuts that we mentioned today. So the custom shortcuts that John is going to cover and the ones that I'm going to cover. But there's so much more to come. There will probably be a couple dozen shortcuts in the initial version, but then over time, my plan is to have a few hundreds shortcuts on this page.
Wow.
Basically, all the ones that I ever created for MacStories, I want to categorize and have feature in a single page that people can go to and browse. It's gonna take me a while, but it's
that's quite a project. I mean, and because there are things like, even I think you mentioned it, that for instance on your morning routine you're thinking of switching in the Apple weather actions for the dark sky API calls, and that's, to me, that's like a interesting change to it because it's just simpler and a little easier than what you were doing before.
Right. Yeah. So funny enough, I'm using 2 custom shortcuts to create the shortcut archive, it gets really, really meta and deep. Like I'm using shortcuts to categorize shortcuts. It's a lot of work.
It's shortcut inception, I think, is what you
Mhm.
call it, right?
Yes.
All right. Well,
All right.
should we dig into some of these?
Yes. Tell me one of your favorite shortcuts that you're using with the Shortcuts app.
All right. Well, you're going to find very quickly that some of these have been not created by me, but have been created by you, because I have for many years now, I guess, ridden your shortcuts coattails. But the first two I want to mention are ones that I created not too long ago myself, because there's an app, by the time this show is published, there's an app called Remote for Mac. It's an iOS app for controlling your Mac that is adding Siri shortcut support. And what's really nice about that is I have found that my Mac screen does not always go to either the screensaver or to sleep. It just stays on, and like go to bed, and I'll get up the next morning and the screen is still blaring down in my office in the basement. And I don't like that because I don't want screen burn in. It's a waste of electricity. I just don't want that to happen. So what I have now, what Remote does is it can control apps, but it can also control all sorts of system functions. So you can turn off the screen, you can sleep your Mac, you can do all those things with the touch of a button in the app. But with Siri shortcut support, I've combined that with controlling the lights in my studio, so that when I'm done working for the day, I head up the stairs and I say to the HomePod, I'm finished working. And the lights go off and the screen goes dim and it goes to sleep, which is really nice. And then I just do the opposite in the morning. In the morning, I come downstairs, I have some coffee, a little breakfast, and I say, it's time to work. And the lights come on, and I usually put them in kind of a focus mode, because they're not the colored hues. They're the ambient white, which can do all different shades of white, including kind of like bright blue glaring white that really kind of gets in your face and wakes you up. That's what I do in the morning to kind of help with the coffee to get myself going.
Right. That's very cool, actually. If I use the Mac, I would probably do something similar.
This episode of App Stories is brought to you by our friends at Luna Display. Luna Display is the only hardware solution that turns your iPad into a wireless display for your Mac. It's really quite amazing. You'll have a super portable second display with stunning image quality and basically zero lag. Setting up Luna Display is so simple, you'll be up and running in seconds, and everything works over Wi-Fi. And if you don't have access to Wi-Fi for some reason, you can connect via USB instead. It's super simple. Luna Display acts as a complete extension to your Mac. It supports external keyboards as well as the Apple Pencil and touch interactions. It basically turns your Mac into a touchscreen device. I had a very early look at the Luna Display at WWDC in 2017 and wrote about it on MacStories. As I said then, what Luna Display has done is simply remarkable, and it's only gotten better since that early prototype that I tried. Back then, I sat in a crowded lobby at the Marriott Hotel right next door to the San Jose Convention Center, and the lobby was just packed with developers. All of them had laptops, and all of them were trying to get on Wi-Fi. It was not an ideal environment to test something, but you know what? That early version of the Luna Display worked like a champ. The Luna Display feels like magic when you first see it in action, and that was doubly so during that WWDC demo. From the perspective of your Mac, your iPad is a second display. But when you're using it, it's even better because it's touch-enabled. All right, I've got a special deal for listeners of the show. Listeners of App Stories can get an exclusive 10% discount on the Luna Display. This is a great holiday gift idea for creative people in your life. Just go to lunadisplay.com and enter the promo code AppStories at checkout. Again, that's lunadisplay.com and use the promo code AppStories at checkout to get 10% off the Luna Display. Our thanks to Luna Display for their support of this show.
All right, so the first one I want to share is a shortcut that I usually run from the Action extension. It allows me to turn an article from Safari into a template for a linked post on MacStories. So when I come across an article that I want to link on the site, what I do is in Safari, I select the portion of the text that I want to quote on MacStories. And with the text selected, I hit the share icon in the toolbar. and I invoke the shortcuts extension, and I use linked post in Drafts 5. And what it does is it converts the quoted part of the story to Markdown. So it gets the rich text or HTML version of the selection on the webpage, and it converts that to Markdown, and it turns it into a Markdown block quote. But then it also prepares the template for the post. So it uses a header for the title of the original webpage. So I can decide if I want my own link post to have the same title or use a different one.
Mm-hmm.
But by default, it uses the original title of the original webpage. And then it also tries to extract the name of the author of the article and prepares a template saying author name, comma, writing for. So I can just fill in the name of the website. So you can imagine if I'm quoting something from, I don't know, Casey Newton on The Verge, my template would say Casey Newton, comma, writing for The Verge. And the author name is one of the built-in actions of shortcuts, which is the diffbot API. Diffbot is a service that can extract articles as individual entities that have variables. Such as author name or feature image, link, excerpt, that kind of stuff. And at the end, I have this Markdown template, and all I do is I launch Drafts 5, and I create a new note with a default tag, which is post. And that goes straight into my writing workspace, and all the basic information is already filled in. I have a title, I have an author name, I have a quoted selection, and then I can just add my own comments and publish from Drafts.
Yeah, that's very cool. You could do that with really any Markdown.
Oh yeah,
right? Yeah. So I've got something similar that I think you might have created for Ulysses, which is nice. Is there still a difference when you're in Safari using the contextual share button versus the toolbar share button? That's probably something worth pointing out to people.
Yes, only the share sheet that is activated from the toolbar, so from the share icon, gets access to the selection on a Safari webpage.
Right.
If you select text and choose share from the copy and paste menu, that activation method will not have access to the HTML selection on the page for some reason. I don't know why this is the case. It's just what it is. If you want to work with selections in Safari, you got to activate the share sheet from the toolbar.
It's funny because it feels like it should be the opposite. It feels like if something's selected,
I know, right?
The contextual menu ought to be the one that is the one that works, not the one that's kind of attached to the entire page. But that it's good to keep in mind because it's easy to pick the wrong one when you've selected something and all of a sudden it says share right above your selection.
Yeah.
The next one that I want to mention is watch for updates, and this is something that was developed. Yes, this was developed by the MacStories SPG, as we call them, which is the Special Projects Group, right? And it's got a couple of members, and I don't know if we should disclose who's in the Special Projects
Group.
The
names are secret.
All right, the names are secret, but what we've got is a Slack bot that can ping the iTunes search API to see if an app has been updated, and we can do that at various intervals. And what this workflow does is it allows that to be set up. It's really simple. All I have to do, it's a share extension. If I'm in the App Store, I just hit the share button, pick shortcuts, and then use this extension, and it sends this off to the server that's running this Slack bot, which runs some Python, and sets it up so that it's automated. And when an app gets updated, I get a message from Slackbot. Depending on how often it's being pinged, it's, it could be every day, it could be every week, it could be every month, whatever it is, I get a message. And so I wake up a lot of mornings to, here's my list of all the updated apps that I might want to write about today, which is really cool.
Yeah, I love this bot. It's really, really useful. And the MacStories SPG is, a bunch of really, really clever people. That's all I'm going to say.
Thanks to Clean My Mac X for supporting App Stories this week. Clean My Mac is a fantastic way to maintain your Mac. It ensures that you've got the space and speed you need to get things done. It all starts with SmartScan, the all-in-one center for analyzing and optimizing your Mac. There, you'll find sections for cleaning up unwanted files that are cluttering up your Mac's drive, protection, which scans for malware, and speed scanners that run routines to ensure your Mac is running as fast as possible. If you've used Clean My Mac before but haven't upgraded to X yet, you should. Internal tests show that Clean My Mac X runs up to 3 times faster than version 3. The app is easier to use, too. The Clean My Mac Assistant acts as an intelligent advisor, providing explanations and suggestions as you explore ways to optimize your Mac. The malware removal tool checks for system vulnerabilities to help protect your data. Optimization is a one-stop shop for managing your login items, launch agents, resource-hungry apps, and more, letting you tweak your system for better performance. There's also an app updater, which centralizes app updates, and a new menu bar app for monitoring your system's performance in real time. All this comes in a new, fresh design. You owe it to yourself to be sure your Mac is running as smoothly and safely with enough storage to get your work done. Go check out Clean My Mac X today at cleanmymac.com. You're going to love it. Again, that's cleanmymac.com to learn more and download a free trial of Clean My Mac X. There'll be a link in the show notes too. Thanks to Clean My Mac X for supporting the show.
So next is a group of, so this gets quite, it's a lot of information, so sit down and have a coffee and listen through. This is a collection of shortcuts to launch other shortcuts. So I've been fiddling with the idea of building shortcut launchers in shortcuts. So I have 3 main shortcut launchers. One is called Work, the other is called Home Commands, and the other is called Health Menu. The idea is that I have these three buttons in the widget. And when I tap on one of these, I'm presented with a list of other shortcuts that I can run. And I'm going to go through some of these. In the Work launcher, I have a bunch of shortcuts to launch specific actions or screens, specific screens of apps that I use for work. So the Work launcher, for example, it opens the Slack channel where Ryan and John and I talk about things that we need to do for MacStories. So it uses the Slack URL scheme to open that specific channel. It also it has an option to load the latest news from 9to5Mac or Mac rumors, so I can keep an eye on what's going on in terms of Apple news. It has a button to open the Trello board for Club MacStories. It has another button to reopen my shortcuts thread on Twitter. So I have a thread going on Twitter where I share things about shortcuts. That's been going on since July or August, I think. And I've been adding tweets to that thread. And what this does is there's a link to one of those tweets. And by launching it with shortcuts, it opens the Twitter app and it jumps straight into that thread.
That's interesting. I had no idea you were doing that all as one thread.
Oh yeah.
Very
not
clever.
Not all of my tweets, but the most important stuff, it goes into the main thread.
Sure.
The Work launcher also has a few native shortcuts to open Keep It, which is my database reference management app, into specific notes or specific groups. These are native Siri shortcuts that I added to my own custom shortcut. And finally, it also lets me launch the shortcut that I'm using to put together the archive page that I mentioned a few minutes ago. So this is the Work launcher. The Home Commands launcher, it lets me quickly set specific scenes or activate specific accessories via HomeKit or Philips Hue. Home Commands mostly consists of HomeKit scenes that turn on the lights or turn off the lights or set specific colors or turn on my coffee maker. But I also have shortcuts for native Siri shortcuts for the Philips Hue app, mostly because I cannot recreate specific scenes like Savannah Sunset, for example. That's a default scene of the Philips Hue app. I think the colors, they look really nice, and no matter how much I try, I cannot recreate it manually in HomeKit. So I just added a shortcut for the Savannah Sunset scene in my Home Commands list. And finally, there's the Health launcher, the Health menu. This is a way for me to quickly log water and caffeine via HealthKit using shortcuts, but it also contains other health-based shortcuts to check, for example, when my last coffee was during the day, or how much water I've had for the current day. And also it lets me log my current weight and my current waist, what's it called? Circumference?
Size, yeah, circumference.
Size, yeah. So it's a bunch of health kit based actions. And these actions are, so the main idea would be that these 3 launchers, they are a single menu action. They are a single, choose from menu. Each option of the menu launches a shortcut or launches a URL scheme. It's an idea that I had a while back, that I wanted to collect all of these shortcuts together by doing sort of a meta shortcut, like a shortcut launcher. And especially the work one and the health one, I'm using a lot, like every single day. And the best aspect of this is that I don't need to use like a dedicated water tracker anymore. I don't need to use a dedicated caffeine tracker. I can just build my own with presets for like a single cup of espresso or a double espresso, or I don't know, a glass of water or 2 glasses of water that I actually measured with my own scale, so to make sure that the milliliters and the grams of coffee would be correct.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's
it's interesting. Well, because Shortcut still doesn't have folders, so in a way, you've kind of recreated a way of organizing your shortcuts that doesn't require relying on that sort of thing, which is pretty cool.
That was the idea.
Yeah, definitely. I've got one for coffee that's called Two Coffees, and it's a Siri shortcut, and it uses the Recaf app that I just reviewed yesterday. And because most mornings I have just 2 cups of coffee, and so while I'm standing there making it, I can ask Siri to add it to Recaf, and I tried it out this morning again, and it worked just fine. I'm going to mention a series of Club MacStories shortcuts that we use. And I think I probably use these more than anyone else on the MacStories team, mainly because I'm the one who assembles the newsletter on Fridays when it goes out. But there are some of these are common to all of us, because part of what we do is everything when we organize, and we've talked about this before, but when we organize an issue, we use Trello, and we've got a list for the current issue, and then we have a list for each of the various sections. And so we populate that list for the current issue using shortcuts for the most part. We've got one for adding app debuts, which is a section of the newsletter, which is fantastic because you just go into wherever you find an app link, use this shortcut, and it sends it right into Trello, and it includes the artwork, which I really find handy because it's just the visual touchstone to be able to see what you're looking at, and it'll say, oh yeah, I remember. This is, Overcast got updated this week. It's just the visual part of it, I think, helps a lot, but it also includes the link and some other information. Then if you're the one working on the favorites, you can send an app to favorites. There's another one to send a series of apps to a collection. So it creates a grid of icons and artwork for the collection that week. And then there's links, which the links one I use a lot because whenever we do the weekly links, I'll throughout the week be reading various things and deciding, is this something we want to put on the site? Is this something that I want to put in the newsletter? And if it's for the newsletter, all it does is it sends the link to the list of links. And again, it takes the main image from that article and includes it in the cards. So you have kind of a visual indicator of what you're saving. Beyond that, the ones that are really specific to me there's one called POM, P-O-M, which is previously on MacStories. And this is one that you created quite a while ago, which is an old Python script that pulls the last 7 days worth of articles and creates a markdown list of the article titles with the link. And then I just take that and copy it and can paste it right into the newsletter. Now that's one that I probably could stand updating because it relies on the old version of Pythonista from, I think, 2012, not Pythonista 3. But it still works perfectly fine, and I use it every single week, and it saves a lot of time having to go through and pull out the links for every single article that somebody wrote for a particular week.
Very nice.
Yes, probably my absolute all-time favorite one that I'm most thankful for Federico for building for me is images to MailChimp, because a lot of times, especially you will do a workflow in the newsletter that has a ton of images, and doing a lot of back and forth copying and pasting and resizing, because one of the things MailChimp does not like images that are more than 1024 pixels wide. So what this shortcut does is at first it resizes all the images into the MailChimp format, then it uploads them to MailChimp, which is fantastic because it just saves an extraordinary amount of time. The very last one I'm going to mention is round avatars. So when we interview somebody or do a home screen or something, we do a Twitter style avatar. I pull their image. When you pull those images though out of a Twitter app, they're just squares. And to make them look like they do in Twitter, you have to apply a mask. So it's a super simple shortcut that applies a round mask to a square photograph and then saves it up to Dropbox, which is where we have all the assets for a particular newsletter that we send out. But it saves quite a bit of time of having to open up Pixelmator or do some other kind of image editing app. Just do it all within a shortcut very quickly.
I'm gonna try and make these shortcuts, at least some of them, adaptable for people because they're really specific to the MacStories team.
It's a good example of what you can do when you have a very repetitive task that needs to be done over and over again and save yourself time. But yes, some of those are a little specific to what we do.
I want to mention a shortcut that I published on MacStories a few days ago. It's called Apple Frames. This is the new version of the shortcut that what used to be called iPhone XS Frames. This allows me to add physical device frames to screenshots taken on almost all of the devices that Apple is currently selling. So you can take an iPhone XS screenshot and add an iPhone frame to it. It works for the iPad Pro. It works for the 5K iMac, works for the MacBook Pro, works for the Apple Watch 44mm model, works for the old iPhone 10, 8 Plus, 8, 6, 7. Bunch of them are supported in this shortcut. And the best part is there's no configuration involved. So you don't need to download image assets. You don't need to install any files yourself because the images are encoded within the shortcut itself. And I'm using the shortcut a lot for all of my posts on MacStories and the club. There's two versions. One of them that supports the MacBook Pro and the iMac, and the second one that only works for iOS devices. So if you don't care about the Mac, there's a second version that is a little shorter and more streamlined. But yeah, I'm using this all the time. I run it from the Photos through the extension. I launch it from the widget. I launch it from Siri. Of course, it cannot work inside of the extension or Siri or the widget because of memory limitations. You will always be taken to the Shortcuts app, but from there it'll work in a few seconds and you will end up with these nicely framed images saved in your Photos library, which is really nice.
I would say that it actually doesn't work in a few seconds. It works in a few milliseconds because it is so fast that I often wonder, wait a second, did that do something? And then I go look and it's in my Photos library. Yeah, it's incredibly fast. I mean, I, for the longest time, used an app called Long Screen, which is a really good app for combining screenshots into device frames, but it's not been updated with the latest frames yet. And it takes a very long time to load a large screenshot library like I've got because I'm bad about deleting them. Shocker. Your frames shortcut does a much better job and faster job for me. So I've been using that as well.
Mm-hmm. All right. Tell me about your email shortcuts because these ones I want to hear about.
I know. I almost skipped over those. So there's a couple. One you created, one I created. The one I created is just... I spend a fair amount of time on and off contacting companies about sponsoring MacStories or App Stories. And some of these people are people who we know, some of them aren't. And the ones that aren't, I have kind of a canned introduction to what MacStories is and what the sponsorships are about and that sort of thing. And so I use the sponsor prospects shortcut to do those emails. So what I'll usually have in split view on an iPad and be researching companies on the left in Safari and have the shortcut on the right. And what's nice about it is, I just go on a website, I find an email address to contact someone with, and I copy it. And then this shortcut will populate an email with that address already in it and all the body of the stuff ready to go. I make a couple of little tweaks and then I hit send. So it doesn't require me to be constantly opening a new email message and doing compose. It's all just very quick and side by side with the research I'm doing on companies. And the other one is for giveaways. We'll do giveaways on Club MacStories fairly frequently. And a lot of times maybe if we have like 10 codes, it's not that big a deal for me to send 10 emails. But if we have 20 codes, or we even had 100 codes before, it's just not, it's just super time consuming to send out emails to winners after we pick randomly their email addresses. So it's a shortcut that you created that takes a list of emails and a list of promo codes for the App Store, and it just slots them in. So it creates an email message using the emails for the to line of the email, and then it drops the promo code into the body of a form email message that we send out to the winners. And it saves an extraordinary amount of time. It doesn't do it all like automatically. What it does is each one of these, it pulls up the email and you have to hit send, which I actually kind of like because I want to make sure that everything's right and there isn't a mistake and it hasn't done something strange. But that just means I end up hitting send like 20 times. But it's quite fast and a lot faster than doing it by hand.
The final shortcut that I want to cover is my Overcast controls shortcut. This is, again, another menu. You can tell that I love menus, especially in the widget, that lets me control Overcast in the background, thanks to Overcast 5's native Siri shortcuts on iOS 12. The idea would be that while I'm listening to an episode in Overcast in the background, I can swipe over to the widget and I can do things like skip to the next chapter or jump back to the previous chapter. But I can also share the Overcast link to the episode that I'm listening to, and that link will be copied to the system clipboard so that I can share it somewhere else without having to open Overcast at all. And also, in addition to the standard link, there's an option for the timestamped link if I want to share an episode at a specific point during the conversation. These shortcuts, they're all native Overcast actions that I added from the Shortcuts app by navigating to the Overcast category. I think it's really nice because it shows you how these shortcuts, they're much more powerful than URL schemes because they don't launch Overcast. They just work in the background, and they are native extensions, you can call them, that perform an action without forcing you to switch contexts.
Yeah, that's a really nice one, and I use the same shortcut and have extended it myself because it's just really easy to add menu items. I added the recommend action to it so that you can, like you would do in the app, you would just hit the star. Now I have the recommend, which I kind of like doing. I found that I didn't recommend podcasts very often in Overcast because usually my phone, I just didn't have Overcast open while I was listening to a podcast. But now with this, it's a lot easier to do. So I've been using it. All right, Federico, I think that's enough for today. We'll be talking about shortcuts a lot in the future too, I am sure. So that site, that special page on MacStories that Federico mentioned at the top of the show related to all these shortcuts that he's updating, we're going to soft launch that, and we're going to make it exclusive for a short time to App Stories listeners as a little reward. So if you go to macstories.net/shortcuts, you can get in on the ground level. There's like 30 plus shortcuts there now. There's going to be a lot more. But I've found one of the best ways to learn how to make your own shortcuts is to see examples of ones that other people have created. And this is really good ones that are already on the site. Like I said, there'll be more coming. But if you go there now, you'll get 30 plus shortcuts to take a look at and download. And we'll be expanding the list and announcing the page more broadly soon. But for now, it's just for App Stories listeners. And with that, I think we'll call it a show. I want to thank our sponsors again, Luna Display and Clean My Mac X, for making this episode possible. And as always, you can find me and Federico over on MacStories.net and writing for Club MacStories. Federico's on Twitter. He's at Viticci. That's VITICCI. And I'm at John Voorhees. JOHNVOORHWS. Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.